Since 2006, I have been working, with my team on the some of the vexing issues in fact in Indian history and archaeology. There are two important issues that we have been dealing with for past many years. One is that who are the people who started the agriculture and settled way of life in Indian subcontinent, and secondly, who are the authors of the Harappan civilization. And also, when we talk about the Harappan civilization, there are issues like the Vedic people and the modern people living in fact in this part, whether they are the descendants of the Harappans or what was the relation between the Harappans and the contemporary population. So these are the many questions that we had, and we have not really published anything on this particular issue, mainly because we were interested in generating sufficient scientific data on these issues, which will convince everyone, in fact, the scholarly world as well as the common people. And therefore, since 2006, I've been working in the area which is considered to be the cradle of the civilization, in fact, the Saraswati region, or today it is called the Ghaggar Hakra Basin. Now, this region was very important because we are getting very important evidence about the origin of the village life and the development from village life to the urban life. So this is a very important issue, very important region, and considering these issues, we selected some important sites where we are likely to get very important evidence to resolve some of the earlier issues. So we selected sites like Girawat first, which is the early Harappan site in fact in that part. Then also subsequently we excavated the site of Farmana, Mitatal, and now of course we have been working on the biggest Harappan city called Rakhigadi. All are located in the middle of the Saraswati region. Now, when it comes to the beginning of agriculture or the origin of agriculture, origin of domestication of plant and animal, it was always thought by many scholars, both in fact the outsider scholars and the Indian scholars. They always thought the concept or the ideas have come from outside, and there were some scholars who also believe that probably the people came from outside and they began this development in the Indian subcontinent. But there is a very important site which has produced very important evidence to resolve this particular issue. But nobody cared to analyze this site properly, the data from the site properly, and therefore some of the issues have been lingering for such a long period. The name of the site is Mehergarh in the Baluchistan region of Pakistan, and this site was excavated by French scholar J.F. Jarij, and the excavation began in 1975 and continued till the middle of the 1980s. And this site has, in fact, in the proper evidence, in fact, in the lowermost level, there is a evidence of the origin of the domestication and plant life, and also people have started experimenting with the production of some of the crafts, basic crafts required by the people. So we have very strong evidence, in fact, regarding that. And then there are 7 different stages of development at this particular site. And this development at every stage, in fact, in the lowermost levels, we do not have pottery. In the second level, people have started introducing pottery, very, very crude and handmade pottery. The third level, pottery becomes slightly, maybe refined. Fourth level, it becomes much finer, and in the next level, it becomes the classical Harappan pottery. So there is evidence about the gradual growth of the Harappan culture and Harappan civilization at this particular site, which was published, but it was not properly referred or analyzed by the scholars, and therefore they kept on persisting that the ideas have come from outside. So this is one evidence which cannot be neglected, and in all the 7 different stages we can see the introduction of the typical Harappan element. For example, terracotta art was one of the important element of the Harappan culture. So right from the beginning we have the evidence of terracotta art, and in that also there is a gradual growth. The earliest terracotta art is very simple and symbolic, then it attains the proper form. So that type of evidence there, and in the maybe sixth or seventh stage, it becomes a classical art. So there is evidence in fact in that. In case of structures also, we can see similar evidence. In the early stage, people have built small and very circular or squarish structures, and gradually the size of the structures begin to increase from time to time, and at some stage people have adopted some kind of plan, modicum of planning, and in the last stage there is a proper town planning. So there is a gradual growth in that also. It is not that the urbanization has come suddenly in this part. So that is the kind of evidence we are getting. So that is the evidence from the Balochistan part of the Indian subcontinent. The area where we are working, I have mentioned about 4 or 5 sites. There also now we have a proper evidence about the growth of the Harappan civilization. From the beginning to the most prosperous phase, we can see that particular journey in fact very clearly in fact in the archaeological data, also in the Saraswati region also. At sites like Virana and Girawat, in the lowermost levels, people have introduced very small circular structures. That is how the Harappans began their lifestyle very modestly, and then gradually they started building rectangular structures, square structures. They introduced typical Harappan bricks, typical Harappan ratio at some stage, and then in the third or fourth stage there is a modicum of planning, and then it becomes a proper well planned and well designed settlement. So that is the kind of evidence we are getting. So in case of the Harappans, we have 3 different stages. One is called the early Harappan stage, which is now dated in fact quite early, going back to 5500 BC, and from 5500 BC till 2600 BC, there is a gradual growth in fact in the culture, and transforming that particular growth into urban phase, around 2500 BC. And similarly, we can also see similar development in the ceramic also. The early ceramic in this part, of course, it is Harappan ceramic, but the Harappan ceramic introduced in the beginning is very crude and handmade again, and then there is a gradual refinement, and it becomes fully developed classical pottery in fact around middle of the 3rd millennium BC. So that is the kind of evidence. This is a very important evidence, and nobody can neglect this evidence. Nobody can deny this evidence about the origin of the culture and the gradual growth of the culture transforming into the Harappan or the Harappan civilization or the urban phase. So that is the kind of evidence we have, and this is a very important evidence we cite in fact for the indigenous development and the growth of the culture in fact in this part. Suppose according to some scholars, the people and the ideas have come from outside. Suppose the ideas may have come from outside, for example Middle East, where we have maybe slightly earlier evidence of the origin of village life and settled life. So suppose that people had come from that part, or ideas would have come from that part, then it would have reflected in the material culture that is found here. People would have brought the material culture with them, and then they could have started living here. But that is not the case. In fact, we are getting completely different evidence in that particular respect. So this is the very strong evidence about the archaeological evidence that we have, and this shows the development done by the local people. Then we have started the new research now, the DNA research in fact, the first time in fact in the Indian subcontinent, this particular research methodology has been adopted. It was thought that getting DNA from the ancient skeletal remains, 5,000 years old skeletal remains, is impossible because DNA would not have survived, and at the same time the climatic condition here is such that it does not allow survival of the this type of very delicate and very important data. But I tried this in fact. I tried at the site of Farmana, where I excavated one of the largest cemeteries, and there we excavated nearly 70 burials, 70 skeletal remains. But maybe we were maybe wrong in fact in our approach there. What we did in fact, we excavated all the burials at a time, and then then we kept them open for almost for a month because we wanted people to come and see them. But in that particular stage, because of this long duration of the exposure, all the data that was there, perhaps that slipped away. And in spite of our best efforts, we did not get DNA from that. And we know that if you want to really understand about the people, about the composition of the population, then you need to have this very critical data, the DNA data from the skeletal remains. And then only perhaps we can talk about the people, in fact, who are the people. But then later I came in contact with the Koreans. Koreans have one of the finest forensic science departments in Seoul National University. And the scientists told me that maybe the approach that you adopted is slightly different, in fact, maybe it's not conducive. So they said that you have to change the approach, and accordingly we took proper precaution. In fact, we took proper precaution for the excavation. We made sure that there is no contamination of the modern samples in that. Secondly, we excavate individual burial. We recorded that, and then immediately we packed the samples and transported to our laboratory in Deccan College, Pune. And later we cleaned them, and then we started extracting samples from that. And then of course for the extraction of samples, we had to send the samples to CCMB, the Center for Cellular and Molecular Biology in Hyderabad, because they have the facility, they have the clean room, in fact, which is required for sampling purpose. So we sent the samples there, and there they extracted the DNA from them. So they tried nearly 40 different individuals, and finally we succeeded in getting some weak DNA from 5 skeletal remains. And then we thought that perhaps this data is not enough, but still we were trying, and finally we got DNA from 1 skeletal remain, which is very, very strong, and that is a very game changer, in fact. Now this data is very important. Now this DNA that we have analyzed, now that is giving clue now. But what we did, in fact, we did not only satisfied in getting analysis from India, because there will be always criticism from outside, maybe from Harvard, because Harvard has one of the best laboratories for analyzing the DNA. And we thought that why not to involve these people also. So this CMB did the basic analysis, primary analysis here, and then for the advanced maybe processing, they do not have the sufficient facility. So we involved the Harvard lab in that, and David Rick, which is one of the best genetic scientists, in fact, in the world. He himself was very much interested, so he got involved in that, and he carried out hundreds of tests, in fact, in his lab. And ultimately we came to know that this particular exercise was so expensive. Ultimately we have spent something like 4 to 5 crores for getting DNA from this skeletal remains. So very expensive, and we know that this is not going to be common, in fact, in other sites also. So he did that everything, and then the analysis that we had done, in fact, in India, that results were compared with the results obtained from the Harvard laboratory. And when we were convinced that both are on the same page, then only we decided to publish this particular data. The data that we have now reveals completely it is very different from our expectation. We always thought that maybe the Iranians may have played some important role in the development of agriculture, in the development of the culture here, or maybe people from steppe region may have come here, and they may have played some important role. And that is what is happening, in fact, going on, in fact, in the Indian subcontinent for last many years. But to our surprise, we do not have any gene from either from the ancient farmers of Iran or the steppe pastoralists in the DNA of the South Asian people. So this is a different DNA of the local people. We do not have any contact in the initial stage with the maybe farmers of Iran or the steppe region. So most of the development now, this is very important, that we are getting the DNA of the indigenous people, and same people have are continuing till modern times. And interestingly, the DNA of the Harappans are matching with the DNA of the modern people. So we believe that the entire South Asia has the DNA of the Harappans. The Harappans have played a very important role in the development of the of the culture impact in South Asia. And I personally believe that the Harappans are the founders of the Indian culture and tradition. So from the Harappans till modern times, we can see this particular, particular continuity, and that continuity is very much visible, in fact, in the in the gene, in the DNA data, as well as in the archaeological data also. I'll just cite one example. We are excavating the site of Rakigadi, and when we are excavating, we stay there for 3 to 4 months. And in the evening, when we have time, we move in fact in the village, and there we get the feel that we are moving the Harappan village, because the roads are exactly same like the Harappan roads. The structures, the houses are exactly same like the Harappan houses, and even the pots that are being used by the people today, the earthen pots particularly, they look exactly like the Harappan pots. So there is a continuity in that. If you keep one modern pot and one Harappan pot side by side, perhaps you will not be able to make out which one is ancient and which one is modern. So that much similarity. Even the food habit has not changed for 5,000 years, because even though people have switched over from earthen vessels to the maybe metal vessels, the basic shapes have remained same, indicating that perhaps the food habit of the people is not changed also, and even the agricultural system has not changed. At the site of Kalibanga, we have found the plowed furrow marks, and there are two furrow marks in two directions. One, in north-south direction we have furrow marks which are very close to each other, and in the east-west direction we have furrow marks which are quite apart from each other. So in the furrow marks, which are close to each other, they were cultivating the main crop like wheat and barley, and also at the same time they were taking secondary crop in the furrow marks which are in other direction. So today, if you see the system in Rajasthan and Haryana, it is exactly the same system people are following. And interesting, now the Harappans introduced chicken tandoor, and that is the the delicacy which is so common and popular in fact in that part. So that shows in fact there is so much continuity even in the material culture. There is a continuity now, of course, in the in the gene of the people, and also in the material culture. So this particular data is very important now. Now we can draw conclusions, many conclusions from that. The first conclusion that we can draw is that the settled life here, the domestication part, and also the process of urbanization, that was initiated by the people of South Asia only, without any outside contact. Later, of course, these people came in contact with outside world, and maybe there is a possibility of mixing up the population at later stage, and that will certainly happen, because the Harappans had contact with Egypt, with Mesopotamia, with Iran, and different parts. So that is going to happen, but the development is indigenous. That is very important. Secondly, since there is a continuity from the beginning of the settled life till modern times, we do not find any scope for the for accepting the theory of Aryan migration or Aryan invasion. So we do not find any substance in that. So that theory can be also put on hold, and now we can move forward in fact based on scientific data. Thirdly, the urbanization in this part also was introduced by the local people, and we have a lot of reference about the Vedic people. So I firmly believe that that the Vedic people are not outsiders; they are very much part of the South Asian people, and these are the people who are indigenous. And according to me, the Harappans and the Vedic people are one and the same, because whatever description we see in fact in the Rigvedic text or the Vedic text, we have that data in fact, actual data in fact in the Harappan levels, and therefore I always relate the Rigvedic with the Harappans. And finally, that there was a Sir Mortimer Wheeler, in fact, who one of the excavators of Harappa. He mentioned that the Aryans came to Indian subcontinent around 2000 BC, and these are the people who destroyed the Harappans, who according to him were the Dravidians. But now, and this particular theory was based on the fact that there were some skeletal remains found in fact scattered in the street of Mohenjo-daro, and without analysis, he thought that these are the people who were killed by the Aryans. But later, in fact, these skeletal remains were subjected to detailed scientific studies, anthropological studies by a very famous anthropologist, physical anthropologist, Kenneth Kennedy, American scholar. And he established that these people did not die in any attack. There are no injury marks. They were lying in fact in the silt deposit, maybe flood deposit, and possibly, according to him, these people may have died because of suffocation, because of the flood, not because of the attack. So that evidence also is not supporting the hypothesis put forth by Wheeler. So this, most of the hypotheses, which were, built by the earlier scholars, now they will be demolished because of this particular scientific data, and nobody can deny the archaeological data and the genetic data that we have in the Indian subcontinent.